Welcome. This video covers the SAS Studio IDE in a little bit more detail. We've already written one SAS program using the SAS Studio IDE. We saw over on the left that there were a lot of different navigation panes that could be useful for us. So we saw the server files and folders that allowed us to see what files we had access to and what folders we've created, what folders we have shared with us. We also saw the libraries section as where our data is stored. And so that's going to be really useful for us to know, and it's really nice in SAS Studio that we have a nice visual of that over on the left. And then over on the right, we have our programming area. So when we create a new program or load one up, we have that program tab, and that gives us a code tab, a log tab, and a results tab. We're also going to look at the settings. So there's this button up here to change our settings of what SAS Studio looks like. And some of the main things that you might want to think about changing would be where your tabs and panes are located. So you can go in there and change those. If you want to put your results tab somewhere else or your code tab somewhere else, you can do that. And then, of course, the always important font size and appearance of the font. So you can change how big it is, depending on your resolution. That can be really useful to make that bigger. And then you can do things like enabling your autocomplete and your hints. So as you're beginning to learn how to program in SAS, I would definitely recommend turning that on when you're using SAS Studio. Okay, so now let's go through and recap some of those things that we saw in our last video. So the code tab, whenever you open a new program, is of course where you're going to write your code. And what happens in SAS is that you can't usually run your code line by line and get something meaningful out. Usually what you need to do is you need to submit code in SAS steps, so one step at a time. And again, when you're writing your code, you can submit it using that running man or by default F3. Oftentimes what we're going to want to do is just highlight certain sections of the code that we want to submit and then run it that way. Again, when you're typing your code, if you've turned on the hints and the autocomplete, SAS is going to help you out in a lot of ways. It's basically going to bring all of the SAS documentation that tells you exactly how to use SAS into your programming environment. And so this is fantastic and really can save you a lot of time from trying to go and Google things. So for instance, when I start typing proc, it's going to say, oh, do you want proc or procedure? Those are two common things. As you finish typing proc, say print, data equal, it's going to show you all the different data sets that you have access to and what libraries they're located in. Again, these hints and autocomplete are really, really useful as you're just learning how to figure out how to do SAS programming. Okay, what is that log tab again? Remember, the log tab is where you want to go anytime you submit code. That's the first place you should check because it's going to tell you any issues that you have when you run your code. So for instance, here, this chunk of code has been submitted for running, but we can see that there is some red in here. We have an error. And so this error says that the variable distance is not in this file. And so we have used the incorrect variable name, and SAS has thrown us an error and let us know, hey, something didn't go right here, so whatever you're seeing in the results are probably not correct. So again, anytime that you are going to submit code, you should always check the log before you look at your results. Once you are comfortable with what the log says, you then go over to the results tab, and that's where you will see all of the different output that is created by SAS. And so if you submit a whole bunch of different steps at once, you will see a table of contents that allows you to easily sort through what you're seeing. So for instance, here we have the means procedure, the SQL procedure, the print procedure. So you're easily able to jump through the different parts of the output created from those different steps. And like we said before, usually you want to save your code for later use. That's the whole point of viewing programming languages generally. And so you can save the code with that save button, and it will again save on the cloud. And so you need to download that to your computer if you want to, say, move it to a different SAS environment. So you could use it in what we usually program in, SAS 9.4, for instance. And all you need to do is highlight the file you want and hit the download button. All right, so we just wanted to recap the SAS Studio IDE a little bit. Let's go back into SAS and add a little bit to that first program that we created. Let's use proc contents to understand a data set that's already read in. So it's already going to be in one of those libraries that we've talked about. And then we'll use a procedure called sgplot to create a nice plot. All right, so we're back over here in SAS Studio. We want to open up the previous program that we already wrote. It's in the mylib folder over here. I can just double click on this and it will open that as a program for me. And I'm going to change the header now because this is going to be my second SAS program. And what we're going to do is just add to this. So we used the sashelp.cars dataset before. And what we might want to do is learn more about that dataset and how it's stored in SAS. So proc contents is a procedure that will help you understand how SAS has stored a dataset. So we can do proc contents and then data equal to tell it which dataset we want. We're going to reference this dataset by its library and then the dataset name. So it's in the SAS help library. Remember, a library is just sort of a collection of SAS data and SAS programs, somewhere on a computer or on the cloud. So I want that dataset. I'm going to end that proc contents statement with a semicolon. And then that's all I really need to do for a proc content step. So then I'll hit run, or I'll put a run statement. So now we have a proc content step made up of these two statements. Before we run that, I should have put a comment here. We'll check out the metadata about the sashelp.cars dataset. The other thing that we wanted to do here was create a nice plot. And so we'll do something with the SAS help cars dataset again. So I'll do proc sgplot. We'll learn more about this procedure later for creating lots of really nice plots. I'm going to tell it the dataset I want again. And now we need to give it a statement that's going to correspond to which type of plot we're going to use. Again, we're going to learn this later. But I might want just a vertical box plot, for instance. So I'll use vbox to say vertical box plot. I give it the variable that I want, a box plot of horsepower. I end that with a run statement. And now I have a proc sg step in here as well. Just to be complete here, we should put a comment, create a plot. Now, I can just go up here and hit this running man, or I could hit F3 and it will submit all of my code at once. So let's go ahead and do that. So again, as this runs, it's executing the code, making sure that all the syntax that we gave it was correct. We want to check the log. We want to make sure we don't see much green or red. And if we do see any green or red, we want to make sure that we investigate. Nothing going there, so that's good. Now we go over to the results, and there's this table of contents up here that will allow you to easily jump through the different results you see. So if I want to go down and just look at that plot to start with, I can double click on that, and it brings me to that section of the output. And so this is a box plot of the horsepower variable. If I want to look at the contents procedure, I can go over here and jump to the top of that output, the attributes section. I can close that table of contents so I can see my output a little bit better. We'll zoom in so you can see it a little better. So the contents procedure tells you, again, the metadata about your data set. So how did SAS read it in, and what other information about that data set does it have stored? So we have the data set name, for instance, the date it was created, all that kind of stuff. The number of observations over here is pretty important, the number of variables as well. And you can go down, it has a whole bunch of other information if you ever get really into data sets and needing to figure out exactly how it was read in. You can see some really useful information there. But where we're going to focus on would be this little list down here. This gives us the types of variables that we have read in, how they're stored in SAS, and then any information about those variables that we also have stored. So for instance, there's a variable called engine size in this data set. It is stored as a numeric variable. SAS stores its data as either numeric or character. There are only two types. So this is a numeric variable, and it has a label associated with it that's more descriptive than the variable name. It's called engine size with L to give us units as well. And so again, this is metadata about this data set. This is giving me information about how SAS has this stored. And this is going to be really useful for us as we go to learn about how to analyze data. We need to understand how the data is stored to know how to analyze it properly. All right, and so the last thing, we should make sure that we save this program. So I'll go in here, I'll hit save. Oh, actually, I don't want to save over this. I'm going to save this as a new program. So I'm going to do save as instead. I'll save it in the same spot. Go into my library. But I don't want to call it Basics of SAS. Let's call this SAS Studio. And again, now I'll have access to that later on. To recap, we have just dug a little bit deeper into SAS Studio and what it looks like, what we need to know about it. The code, log, and results tab, definitely things we're going to need to understand. Proc contents is a really useful procedure that we're going to continue to use throughout this course that gives us information about how SAS has stored some data. And again, later we're going to study the SG plot procedure, which will make really, really nice plots for us.